Tommy Sullivan had been riding motorcycles for 32 years, and in all that time he'd seen just about everything a man could see on the open road, but nothing had quite prepared him for the little girl standing on the sidewalk that warm Saturday morning in May. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, wearing a blue dress with flowers on it and holding a cardboard sign that read "For Sale" in careful letters, and next to her sat the prettiest little pink bicycle with training wheels and a basket decorated with plastic daisies. Tommy slowed his Harley and pulled over to the curb, and behind him his brothers from the club did the same, their engines rumbling to silence one by one, and the little girl didn't flinch, didn't run, just stood there with those serious eyes waiting. He swung off his bike and walked over slow, the way you approach a scared animal, and he could see now that she'd been crying, though she was trying hard not to show it. "What are you selling there, sweetheart?" he asked, and his voice came out gentler than usual. "My bicycle," she said, and her chin trembled just a little, but she held it high. Tommy's friend Jake came up beside him, and then Marcus and Ray, and they all stood there, these big rough men in their leather vests, looking down at this tiny girl with her homemade sign. "How much you asking?" one of them said. $50, she answered, and it was clear she'd thought about this number, had maybe heard it somewhere, and decided it was what a bicycle should cost. Tommy nodded slow, and he looked at that bike, and he could tell it was well loved, the handlebars wrapped with ribbons, the seat adjusted just right, and he wondered what would make a child sell something she clearly treasured. "Where's your mama?" he asked. The girl's face changed then, and Tommy saw something flicker across it, something old and tired that no child should carry. "She's inside," she said quietly, and she pointed to the small house behind her, a rental property with peeling paint and a yard that needed mowing. "She hasn't eaten in 2 days," the girl added, and the words came out flat like she was reporting the weather, and Tommy felt something crack open in his chest. His name was Tommy, but everyone called him Bull, and he'd done hard time when he was younger, had made plenty of mistakes, but he'd been clean for 15 years now, and his club brothers, they were the same reformed men, trying to do better, trying to be better. Jake knelt down in front of the girl, and his tattooed arms looked fierce, but his voice was soft as cotton. "What's your name, honey?" "Natasha," she said. "That's a beautiful name," Jake told her, "and where's your daddy, Natasha?" The girl looked down at her shoes, and Tommy saw that they were too small, her toes pushing against the canvas. "He took everything," she said, and her voice was so small Tommy had to lean in to hear. "And he left, and Mommy lost her job because she was too sad to go, and now we don't have money for food." Tommy felt his throat get tight, and he looked at his brothers and saw the same thing reflected in all their faces, that particular kind of anger that comes when you see a child suffering because of some man's cruelty. "He also took the car," Natasha continued, "and that's why Mommy can't look for a new job, because we can't get anywhere." Tommy straightened up and pulled out his wallet, and he handed Natasha a $100 bill, but she shook her head. "The bike is only $50, she said firmly. So he took the 100 back and gave her a 50 instead, and she carefully folded it and put it in her dress pocket, and then she looked at him with those solemn eyes. "You have to take the bike now," she said. Tommy looked at that pink bicycle with its training wheels and basket, and he tried to imagine himself riding it, and despite everything he almost smiled. "Tell you what," he said, "how about I buy it, but you keep it here for me, and you can ride it whenever you want and take real good care of it until I need it." Natasha frowned like she was trying to work out if this made sense. "When will you need it?" she asked. "Oh, not for a long time," Tommy said. "Maybe when my granddaughter comes to visit." And that was a lie, because Tommy didn't have any children, but it was the kind of lie that helps. Jake cleared his throat and pulled out his own wallet, and he handed Natasha 2 20s. "This is for the basket," he said. "That's worth extra." Marcus stepped forward next and pressed 3 10s into her small hand. "For the training wheels," he said. "Those are important." One by one the other bikers came forward, and they bought the ribbons and the bell and the seat and the tires, until Natasha stood there with a handful of bills, looking confused and overwhelmed. "But you can't take any of it," one of them said, "so you better keep it all safe for us." "Now where's your mama?" Tommy asked. Natasha led them to the front door and knocked softly, and after a long moment it opened, and there stood a young woman, maybe 30, with hollow cheeks and eyes that had cried themselves dry. Her name was Sarah, and when she saw the bikers standing on her porch, Tommy watched the fear flash across her face, but then she saw Natasha holding all that money, and her expression crumbled into something between hope and disbelief. "Ma'am," Tommy said, and he took off his sunglasses so she could see his eyes. "We bought your daughter's bicycle." Sarah looked at the money and then at her daughter and then back at these rough-looking men on her doorstep. "That's too much," she whispered. "No ma'am," Jake said, "it's exactly right. Sarah started to cry, then really cry, and Natasha wrapped her arms around her mother's waist, and Tommy had to look away because it reminded him too much of his own mother all those years ago when they'd had nothing. Marcus spoke up then, his voice gruff. "Ma'am, we're gonna need you to do us a favor. We've got a friend who owns a diner about 2 miles from here and he's looking for someone, and we told him you might be interested." That was another lie, but it would become true because Marcus would make sure of it. And Ray added, "We know a guy with a car lot and he's got a vehicle he needs to move and he'll work out payments you can actually afford." This was also a lie that would become truth. Sarah couldn't speak, she just stood there shaking her head in disbelief, and Natasha held her tighter. Tommy reached into his pocket and pulled out a card with his number on it. "You need anything," he said, "anything at all, you call." They left then, these big men with their motorcycles and their leather and their tattoos, and as they rode away Tommy looked back once and saw Natasha waving and Sarah still standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth. That night at the clubhouse, Tommy and his brothers sat around talking about the day, and someone asked if they thought Sarah would actually call if she needed help. "She won't," Jake said. "People like that, they're too proud." "So we'll check in," Marcus said casual like. And they did. Over the weeks and months that followed they made sure Sarah got that job at the diner, and they made sure she got a reliable car, and when Natasha's birthday came around somehow a new dress and shoes appeared on the doorstep with no name attached. Tommy rode past that house every few weeks just to see, and he always saw that pink bicycle in the yard, sometimes being ridden, sometimes just sitting there catching the sun, and it made him feel something he couldn't quite name. 2 years later Tommy got a call from a number he didn't recognize, and when he answered a small voice said, "This is Natasha, do you remember me?" "How could I forget?" Tommy said. "I'm selling lemonade tomorrow," Natasha said, "and I wanted to know if you and your friends would come and buy some." Tommy smiled into the phone. "We'll be there," he said. The next day 6 motorcycles pulled up to a lemonade stand where a 9-year-old girl stood with her mother beside her, and they bought every last cup at $5 each. Sarah pulled Tommy aside while the others joked with Natasha. "I want you to know," she said, "that you saved us, and I don't just mean with money, I mean you showed my daughter that there are good men in this world, and after her father I didn't think she'd ever believe that again." Tommy didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, and Sarah hugged him quick and fierce. Sometimes grace comes on motorcycles, Tommy thought. Sometimes angels wear leather and have tattoos, and sometimes the smallest act of kindness creates ripples that spread farther than you can imagine. Years later, when Tommy was older and his riding days were behind him, he got an invitation in the mail to Natasha's high school graduation, and he went and he sat in the back, and when she walked across that stage he thought about a little girl with a for sale sign and a pink bicycle. After the ceremony Natasha found him in the crowd and she introduced him to her friends. "This is Tommy," she said. "He's the man I told you about, the one who taught me that family isn't always blood, sometimes it's just people who show up when you need them most." And Tommy, who'd done hard things and lived a hard life, felt tears in his eyes because he realized that buying that pink bicycle had been the best investment he'd ever made. Not because of the money, but because sometimes you get a chance to change someone's story, and if you're lucky enough to recognize that moment, you take it. You take it and you don't let go.